Genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Those are the accusations against the Myanmar army in a damning new UN report calling for senior military figures to be put on trial. The Myanmar army stands accused of grossly disproportionate violence in its operation in the country's Rakhine state, inhabited by the Muslim Rohingya minority. Over 700,000 Rohingya were forced to flee in the course of that operation.
And now a UN report accuses Myanmar's army of indiscriminate killings, gang rapes, and burning entire villages. It says the country's leader, Nobel Prize laureate Aung Sang Suu Kyi, has not acted to prevent the catastrophe. The report recommended that the UN Security Council refer the case to the International Criminal Court or set up a special tribunal.
The fact-finding mission has concluded on reasonable grounds that the patterns of gross human rights violations and serious violations of international humanitarian law that it has found amount to the gravest crimes under international law. These have principally been committed by the military, the Tatmadaw. The mission has concluded that criminal investigation and prosecution is warranted, focusing on the top Tatmadaw generals in relation to the three categories of crimes under international law: genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes.
Olivia Enos is a policy analyst at the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. Olivia, thanks for joining us. We just heard that call for this to be taken to the criminal court, for Myanmar's leaders to be held accountable. That has not been very successful in the past, the attempt to hold those who have committed war crimes, to hold leaders accountable at an ICC, for example. Is there a reason to believe that this time will be any different?
Well, the fact-finding mission and the report that came out today is a breakthrough moment. It's a moment that the U.S. should absolutely galvanize the international community's energy and attention to hold the most upper echelons of the Burmese military, including General Min Aung Hlaing, to account. While I would agree with you that I think referral to the International Criminal Court at this point is probably unlikely to actually deliver the outcomes and the results that we're wanting, the U.S. has the opportunity to institute additional sanctions through global Magnitsky or otherwise that would directly harm and increase the risk to those military officials who have carried out crimes not just against the Rohingya, but also, as the fact-finding mission found, against the Christian Kachin and Shan.
Olivia, genocide is the crime that was meant to never be repeated. Are we looking at an episode that will be remembered in history along the same lines as Yugoslavia, Rwanda moments, where we ask, how did the world stand by?
You know, I think that this is one of those moments every time genocide happens, as you said, we say never again, and yet it continues to happen. And that's why I think we can't stop short. You know, last week, the administration took a really positive step and placed targeted financial measures against, a select number of Burmese military officials. But those upper echelons who are at the top, they're the ones who are orchestrating these sort of premeditated moves against the Rohingya. They're the type who are going to continue to repeat these actions in Shan and Kachin state if the U.S. and the international community don't come together and coalesce and actually hold these individuals to account and hit them where it hurts, which is in their bank account. That's what sanctions have the ability to do.
Olivia, specifically on that, in the international community, it's a term that's thrown around often, certainly in the case of Syria, for example, where we know well over 300,000 people have been killed over the last 7 years. We're talking about crimes, according to this report, that include murder, enforced disappearance, torture, sexual violence, they say, perpetrated on a massive scale. What specifically do you think that some of these countries, maybe the U.S. leading the charge, can do to make it stop?
I think that this is a moment for the U.S. to make a broader reset in its policy toward Burma. What that means is not only providing humanitarian aid, the U.S. is the #1 provider of humanitarian aid to Burma today, but also including those sanctions against those higher military officials. But beyond that, the U.S. needs to go back and realize that we sacrificed much-needed leverage when we raised sanctions and lifted them after Burma had its democratic or or so-called democratic elections that brought Aung San Suu Kyi to power. But I think it's time for the U.S. to say, look, we need to return to the peace process. We need to return to looking at political reforms that make it so that the military doesn't have the ability to exercise the authority that it currently exercises and subsequently carries out with impunity these vast, horrible human rights abuses.
Olivia, but we are talking about an administration that, if we look over the course of the Trump administration, human rights has not been a priority, not in its talks with China, not with any of the countries here in the Middle East. Do you really think that this administration is going to take that up as a cause?
You know, one surprising thing that the administration has done and has really taken up in a great way has been the cause of ISIS genocide. The designation was made under the Obama administration, but under this administration, we've seen a drive toward increasing aid and assistance to communities in need, the Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslim minorities, so that they can receive the aid that Congress allocated in the past. This didn't happen under the Obama administration. It is happening under the Trump administration. So I think that offers some hope that the Trump administration will be forward-leaning when it comes to addressing the Rohingya crisis, particularly since it's already given so much humanitarian aid and, frankly, should continue to lead the charge in galvanizing international aid to alleviate suffering in one of the worst humanitarian crises of our era.
Olivia, you've been speaking about the need to sanction military figures, but the country's civilian leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been explicitly criticized in this report for turning a blind eye, not speaking up on the issue. Is it time for the Western world to say, perhaps we were wrong about the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and sanction her together with the rest of them?
I think that at this moment in time, it wouldn't be a wise idea to sanction Aung San Suu Kyi. The primary focus should be holding the perpetrators of this violence accountable. I think that the U.S., however, should continue to be critical of Aung San Suu Kyi's silence and basically hold her to account and make sure that she recognizes that the U.S. wants to help her transition Burma into a politically reformed country, and that requires respecting the rights of all minorities, religious or ethnic, in Burma. And I think the U.S. needs to start putting in place policies that would empower Aung San Suu Kyi to do that. Right now, she's really ham-fisted and held back by the Burmese military due to the undue and increasing amount of authority that the Burmese military has, just due to the fact that the Constitution is constructed in such a way that it limits her power. So I think we need to move toward political reform if we have hope of improving human rights.
At least this report is a good starting point for change there.